Patricia Bahia, that was awesome. Every day is a gift. Wow, isn't that a beautiful lesson in itself? Every day is a gift. It's so easy to take it for granted, isn't it? Oh, another day, another dollar, people say, right? Oh, is that all it is? Another day, another dollar. That's enough to depress you, you know? I think we get so caught up in our busyness and comparing ourselves with everybody else and where we are in relation to everybody else and all this stuff that goes on in our heads. And we forget to come right back to the basic thing, which is, wow, I'm here. I'm alive. And I have all these incredible gifts that, you know, the gift of hearing, the gift of, if we have the gift of hearing, the gift of seeing, the gift of tasting, the gift of touching, the gift of looking at others and connecting with other people and nature, and just it goes on and on and on, doesn't it? If we could have that attitude all the time, wow, would we feel good or wouldn't we? We would feel good inside, and guess what? We would understand what the master teacher and psychologist, Jesus the Christ, said, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. Wouldn't we? Wouldn't think, well, abundantly, that means I need more of this or more of that or more that. We're addicted to more and more and more and more. Life isn't enough. And yet it is. Look at children. My goodness, you and I, up until the age of 5 at least, we were rejoicing in being alive, weren't we? Life was fun. And, you know, the great scriptures of the world are re-educating us, helping us to realize once again, how do we live life without letting fear rule us? How do we live life without being so stressed out? So that we can once again, like we were when we were little children, living in trust and faith and joy and life. And let me tell you, that we couldn't do anything better than to activate our healing power, which is the message of today's message, than to be in tune with that gratitude, that appreciation, that aliveness for being alive. How many of you here are grateful to be alive this morning? Yes, that is the secret. That's the secret. When we're grateful for being alive, every day is a new adventure, right? It's a new opportunity to just be happy, to be joyful. How do you activate your healing power? St. Paul said, stir up the gift of God that is within you. Stir up that gift of God. He didn't say, beg and plead until God will answer your prayer. He didn't say that, did he? He said, stir up the gift of God that is within you. That's what we got to do. We got to stir up on a daily basis. Stir up that appreciation for being alive, for the gift of life. My gosh, my right leg might hurt, but my left one is doing well. Whatever it might be, you know, to lift up our minds, to stir up the gift of appreciation, and that activates life within us. And that's what healing is about. Healing is not about trying to convince God to make us well. Because God is not a healer. That's right, God's not a healer. God's not a healer. God is life. God is wholeness. One presence and one power that is at work all the time. When someone cuts their finger or gets a cold or whatever, it doesn't matter whether they go to church or whether they read their Bible or their Bhagavad Gita or what they have done lately, good in the world, that body's going to start trying to heal itself, isn't it? Yes. Why? Because life is biased toward healing. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, said, health is your natural state. Our bodies are biased toward healing. A doctor from Harvard many years ago, he wanted to study cadavers to see what the causes of illnesses were in these people. And as he was making this study, he could see that there were a lot of people who had some serious ailments that healed themselves without them ever even knowing it. They could see the scar tissue in their bodies. And they went back and they looked at the medical records, and there was no indication that anybody knew they had had those illnesses in their bodies. Isn't that interesting? Why? Because life is biased toward healing. The healing process was taking place even when they weren't even aware of it. So we got to get out of our head this idea that we've got to plead or beg or change God's mind and that God wills sickness. That's crazy. God doesn't will sickness. That doesn't make sense, does it? God is everywhere. Life is everywhere. It's always trying to heal us and help us be better. That's life. That's God. That's spirit. Jesus, the Christ, went about healing people or helping them heal themselves, right? He wouldn't go around saying, oh, that's God's will that you're sick and yeah, you know. No, it doesn't make sense. He said it's not God's will that any little one should perish. You go to a funeral and you hear, oh yeah, it's God's will that he was taken home. Well, maybe it was his time to leave the planet. But I don't think it was God's will. It was his soul's time to move on. You know, it has to do with personal choice. And your soul's purpose, I believe, your soul's journey. When my stepfather Henry was in the nursing home, he was in a nursing home for, I forget, 2-3 years. And I was looking after his care. And then my mom was in a nursing home, and she had bone cancer, and she was in there for a year or so. Well, when I got a call from the nurses down in where he was, and they said, your stepfather is dying, Justin. You know, they call it modeling, when the body starts to show signs that the life force is withdrawing. So I went and drove down there immediately, got there early in the morning when he was awake, and he said to me, Justin, I'm tired. I'm ready to go. I hate to leave you. And I said to Henry, Henry, it's okay. I'll be all right. We'll be okay. It's okay to go. And would you believe the next day, he could barely talk the next day. I don't think he could talk at all. He was still conscious, but he just started to move away. The soul's choice. It's a big part of it. His intuition. It was time for him to go. When my dad was in a coma, not trying to depress you, by the way. Enough already, Justin. Enough stories. But I told my dad's wife, his third one. I told the third one. I said, you know, have you told him it's okay to go? Have you told him that? Have you had the conversation? She said, no, I haven't. She's too busy holding on. See, that's what we want to do. We want to hold on. We don't want to let him go. I said, you know, think about that. And she had the conversation. You know, told him it was okay for him to go. She's going to be all right. Next day he left. He'd been holding on for 30 days or 3 weeks, whatever it was, and then he left. You know, we have more power, I think, than we realize, than we recognize. Now, sometimes during this pandemic, I've wondered if certain souls, hey, this was a way to exit. This is a way grandpa or grandma or dad or whoever decided to exit. We don't know. We don't know. But I believe that we have more power and control than we realize on what happens to what we do, where we go. And the same is true with healing grief, dealing with the loss of loved ones, and physical well-being. How we feel physically is a lot more in control, in our power, than we realize. It's not something that God up there is deciding for us. Life is everywhere present. The sages, the great teachers tell us that we are created in the image of life, that we are whole. That's our true nature. That's why it's always trying to restore our body to wholeness and perfection, because it's our true nature. And so one of the keys for us activating our healing power is to accept our responsibility and to begin to identify with our innate wholeness. To know, okay, the body may not be doing too well right now, but I, as consciousness, the one who's in there, right? Hello in there. The one who is looking behind those eyeballs, the one who lives in that body, you, meaning that consciousness that looks out through those eyeballs, not I'm the lawyer, or I'm the this, or I'm the that, or I'm male or female. No, you, the consciousness without the labels, is wholeness, is one with life. You're not your body, you're not your mind, you're not your emotions, you are that consciousness, and that consciousness is one with life, with wholeness. I have a trick question for you. My friend Jim Rosemurgy, minister, was a Unity minister for many years, author. Some of you may have heard him speak, read his books. He used to ask audiences a question: which person is more whole? Lady in a hospital, hooked up with IVs and stuff, body riddled with cancer, or an Olympic athlete who just won a gold medal in the peak of physical condition and health? Which one is more whole? Neither. Because wholeness is not about the body. It's about the spirit. It's about the image and likeness of God that is always whole. St. Paul referred to that as the Lord's body. You that lives in this body are always whole. You are always complete, no matter what the body does. The sages tell us that you, the one in that body, lives forever. We're one with eternal life. And that's a key for our healing, to know that, to identify with that. I am whole. That's how healing happens. Because there's a blueprint, a divine idea, the yogis call it causal mind. In causal mind, there is a perfect idea of you, that image and likeness, that Lord's body, that's always whole. And it's a blueprint for every organ in your body, every function in your body. It's like the divine idea of you. Everything's working perfectly. All the organs are functioning. All the cells are tap dancing beautifully. Everything's happening in your body. There's a blueprint for that. Just like somebody who builds a home, they have a blueprint. First it's in the idea, in the head of someone, it's an idea. Then it's written down on paper or digitally. And then they get construction materials and build it. There's an idea of you as a perfect spiritual being, a perfect child of God, whole and complete, everything working beautifully, and that idea begins to manifest. So the metaphysicians tell us that the more we identify with our wholeness, the more we take time to get still and connect with wholeness, the more we can allow that wholeness to express through our cells, through our organs, through our body. So identifying with wholeness. When I was in ministerial school, I had a friend, Sasha, well, her name was Alexandra Zikova. We called her Sasha. She was from Russia. And she and I dated. We were girlfriend and boyfriend. And she became Russia's first woman unity minister. Her dad was the first unity minister in Russia. And she told a story when she was 15 years old, demonstrating this wholeness. When she was 15 years old, she left her apartment in Moscow, went out for a run, and when she was coming back, she saw a little dog wagging his tail, and he looked hungry. So she picked up the little dog and headed back to her apartment, forgetting that her cat, William, did not like dogs. So as she opened the door, William usually was in the kitchen, but William came out of the bedroom and started to and Sasha held the dog and quickly moved toward the door and threw the dog out the door, but the cat jumped up on her to try to get the dog, and so the dog left. She closed the door, and when she looked at her right arm, there was blood all over her arm. Well, she didn't think anything of it. She washed it off. And then her hand, later in the day, started to turn blue. And then the blue started to spread. I believe it was the next morning, her whole arm was blue up to the shoulder. Well, she went to the hospital. They put her in emergency area where people were awaiting amputations. This was Russia. When I went to Russia, I got the flu or something, and we thought it was much worse, and I wanted them to check my heart, and they didn't have enough paper to do the heart machine or whatever. We're out of paper. We can't do the test. So anyway, here she is in an amputation room, and that night her friend brought her 3 roses. And roses were expensive for them, and he brought her 3 roses. And that night, around 2 a.m., in her hospital bed, knowing that she was going to get this amputated if something didn't happen, she said that I looked at the perfection of those roses, and I thought, if only that life that's in the rose, if only I could get that life inside of my body, that wholeness inside of my body. She said that she hugged the roses and she kissed the roses, and tears were coming down her eyes. And at one point she felt a sense of release and she went to sleep. The next morning, she woke up and the swelling was gone. The color had been restored to her arm. And the doctor who was to do the amputation came in with some of his people, and they were looking at her, and they looked at her arm, and it had been restored. He looked at his people and he said, well, sometimes it takes a while for the penicillin to kick in. What happened? I believe she somehow tuned in the wholeness that was in the rose, the perfection that was in the rose, because she was so emotionally identified with that wholeness. Somehow she tapped into her own innate wholeness, and life was released. She activated her healing power. And I believe, that healing power is always trying to work. Our cells are renewing all the time. Our body is always dealing with stuff. The key is that you and I need to get on the side of healing. We need to put ourselves on the side of wholeness to support that process that's trying to always happen, as opposed to attitudes that can frustrate that wholeness. Attitudes that can block that wholeness. Overly stressed, overly worried, complaining, over cynicism, negativity, all these things, talking about ailments. You ever meet people who love to tell you their latest ailments? Some people, that's what they do. They're like, well, how are you? Oh, my back is hurting me today, and Nobody, the first time we're compassionate, we want to hear that. But most people, they don't want that to be the weekly dialogue of illnesses, right? We've got to put ourselves on the side of healing, to affirm life, to talk about life, to read inspirational books, to listen to inspirational messages that remind us of our wholeness, of the healing life activity that's inside of us that we can draw upon all the time. This is how we support that healing activity that's taking place within us. What are some other ways we can activate it? Love. Living in love. We've sung enough about love today, haven't we? Singing about love can help activate that love flow within us, Being loving is not just something that we're supposed to do. You're supposed to be loving. No, Dr. Smiley Blanton, who used to work with Norman Peale, he said, without love, there's a frustration of life within you. That more illness is because of people's sense of loneliness and a sense of a lack of love. That's why love can be healing within us, a loving heart. A study was done in 1980 where they were testing the cholesterol in rabbits. I know all of us are real concerned about rabbits having heart disease. So they were testing the cholesterol in rabbits. They were giving the rabbits cholesterol. That's not very nice, but they were doing that. And the rabbits were probably kind of enjoying it a little bit. So they were giving these rabbits cholesterol, and they were testing the different groups of rabbits to see how it was going to affect them so they could help humans. Well, one group of rabbits was doing much better than the others. And they're like, why is this group of rabbits doing much better than the others? Well, what they discovered is that the person who was taking care of this particular group of rabbits wasn't just throwing the food into the cages. He was taking the rabbits out. He was petting the rabbits. He was loving the rabbits. And then he'd put them back in the cages. Somehow, those rabbits were moving that cholesterol through a different channel in their body. That extra love somehow helped those rabbits. Other studies done where preemies, babies born prematurely, where they were experimenting to see what would happen. The doctors they had a window and they would put their hands in and stroke the preemies for several minutes to see what effect that would have on the preemies. And those preemies they grew faster than the other ones. They got better faster than the other ones. They called this love kinesthetic tactile stimulation. Doesn't that sound warm and loving? Give me some kinesthetic tactile stimulation, will you? So they discovered that just that stroking, that giving love, actually saved the hospital like several $1,000 per baby. Didn't have to stay in the hospital as long. Love, activating, living a loving life isn't something we're just supposed to do. It's our true nature. It's what makes us healthy. We are vitally alive when we are loving, when our heart is open. Living in joy, Satchidananda, conscious eternal bliss, tuning into bliss, to love, to happiness is so important for our healing. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, says Proverbs. A merry heart doeth good like a medicine. It's not just Pollyanna. Joy is healing. Activate your healing power by finding happiness and joy, by being happy and joyful, bringing it to our everyday life. One of the things Dr. Peel said that helped me many years ago is he told a business person, he said, the business person very upset, stressed out, unhappy. He said, what I want you to do is I want you to write down all the things that trigger joy inside of you. You know, write down, well, what triggers joy inside of you? Well, we heard some singing on the song today on The Gift, right, from Patricia. Well, I love seeing Red Roof in the wintertime. I love hearing little child's laughter. I love working on my composition. Whatever. What is it that brings you joy? He said, what I want you to do during this week is anytime you find yourself starting to feel down, pull out that list and read over those things that trigger joy inside of you. And the person went away, came back a week or two later, and they walked into his office with a different step. There was more life in their step. And he said, Dr. Peel, it is amazing. When I left your office, I thought, what a stupid thing to do. That is really Pollyanna. But I did it. I did it. And it worked. It worked. You know why? Because happiness is a habit. Happiness is a habit. Joy is a habit. Joy is within you. It's a habit. Stir up the gift of joy that is within you. It's within you. Unhappiness is a habit. It's a habitual way of thinking, habitual way of being, habitual way of acting, and happiness is a habit. We can choose to be happy, to be joyful. Yogananda, the great yogi sage, the yogi sage said, choose to be even-minded and cheerful at all times. I am even-minded and cheerful at all times. Now, your life could be falling apart around you. There could be lots of stuff happening with the mortgage, with the rent, with the finances, with the business, with the relationship. I've been there. All this stuff could be going on. But Jesus said, in the world you have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. In the world there's tribulum, Latin for stress, stresses. In the world there are stresses. But be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. How? By learning that joy is inside of me. By learning that I can choose what I focus my attention on. That I can truly be grateful for being alive. Being alive. The business is having challenges. Oh, isn't that wonderful? How wonderful that I have a business in the first place, that I have the opportunity to choose to help make this thing grow. I have the opportunity to turn to God, to have faith and spirit, to watch how this thing's going to work out. You know, we really have the choice to choose what we want to think about. It's our mind. It's not anyone else's. It's our mind. And you, the one who has a mind, can choose what you're going to think about and how you're going to think about it. Rejoice in the Lord always, the psalmist said. Rejoice in the Lord always means you can choose whatever thoughts you want to think. You can focus your mind on whatever you want to focus it on. St. Paul said, whatever things are true, noble, good, and just, think upon these things. Think upon these things. That doesn't mean you're not aware of the illness. You're not aware you have a headache. You're not aware that you've got symptoms that you should get checked out. Doesn't mean you're not aware, but you also realize that's my body. That's not me. That's my body. I am spirit. I am wholeness. And yes, I'm going to go get it checked out. Yes, I'm going to get a checkup. And I'm going to help activate healing life by choosing to love, by being joyful, by thinking about life and wholeness and goodness, to being positive, because that helps to activate that healing flow. And I just feel better. I feel better. You and I have the ability to activate our healing power. It is a choice. It is our birthright. Life is on the side of healing you, of supporting you. That's the nature of life. But we've got to make the choice to support that. And that takes discipline. That takes commitment, doesn't it? It takes commitment. There's no magic formula. Metaphysicians can get off on, well, I'm going to say this affirmation and somehow it's going to bing, bam, boom, I'm healed. That's not how it works. It's not a magic wand. I'm going to light this healing candle every day and put it in the corner. Well, it might smell nice. It might look nice. But that's not going to make you whole. You are whole as a spiritual being. We've got to choose the thoughts. We've got to choose the behaviors to support the unfolding of that wholeness. And if you have a serious illness right now and you've been practicing this stuff for years and you're like, I don't know if this stuff works. I've been trying. Or what did I do to bring this about? Why is this happening? Metaphysicians do not need to ask that question when you're struggling with a physical challenge. You don't need to know why is this happening. That's not constructive. Get yourself on the side of wholeness and healing. And know that no matter what this body does, I am a spiritual being and I am alive and I'm going to choose love. I'm going to choose life. I'm going to put myself on the side of healing. I'm going to be an uplifting presence no matter what this physical body does, whether it heals itself or it doesn't. It's all in divine order. All is good. All is well. Don't wait until you need to heal yourself. That's my last point. Take care of yourself now. Do what you can to support your physical, emotional, and mental health. I have seen great spiritual leaders who had serious illnesses later on in their life, and they died with those physical challenges in their body. Eric Butterworth was one of them. He was a wonderful spiritual teacher, but he got Parkinson's the last 15 years or so of his life, and he struggled with it. And I asked him, I was afraid to ask him directly. I was much younger than I am now and much more naive than I am now, but I didn't want to ask him directly, but he kind of answered the question. He said that I'm learning and growing from this experience. It gives me an opportunity to choose a positive attitude no matter what my physical body is doing. And I say to you, if your body is in good shape, make sure you're giving it what it needs. Make sure you're giving it the right nutrition. Make sure you're choosing positive attitudes. Make sure you're exercising this physical body. Make sure it gets the rest it needs. Don't take advantage of your physical body thinking, well, I can always heal it later. Take care of it so you may not ever have to heal it later. Let's get still for a moment. And we acknowledge that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And it is a gift. And we thank you, Father, Mother God. We're grateful for the gift of life and for eternal life. The promise that I'm alive now and I'm going to be alive forever. that I'm living in the foreverness of life right now. And so I have the opportunity to learn and grow from every experience. That I'm always whole and complete. I'm always one with your Spirit. As the great teachers have said, I and the Father are one. I and the Mother are one. I and the universe are one. I am life being lived. I am joy. I am love. And I go forth this day affirming that for myself and others. I remember those struggling with health challenges. I remember those people, and I lift up my thought for them. I affirm that you are whole. You are a spiritual being living in eternity. And I bless you. And I know that God's healing life is flowing through you now. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for your presence, for your life. And so it is. Amen. Thank you for coming out this morning, those of you here in the space with us, and those of you online, thank you for watching with us, creating this healing consciousness for ourselves and others. And I want to thank our musicians today, Patricia and Jami, for their awesome music. Thank you, Miguel, for your hosting, and for everyone involved in welcoming and greeting, and our online camera folks. Thank you all. So let us join together in knowing the prayer for protection. Together, the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Yay, God. God bless you, and namaste.